Hello, friends and neighbors. John, your whiskey neighbor here, and welcome down to the Nook. Today, we're going to talk a little bit of bourbon. This is going to be some thoughts on a bottle and bond. What I have here is part of the, I think they call it the Whiskey Row series. It's from Old Forester. Now, this is the 1897 bottle and bond release, not their regular bottle and bond. So, if you've got any Old Forester or any bottle and bond bourbon, why don't you pour a little bit? When you come back, I'll talk about Old Forester 1897 bottle and bond. 3, 4. Well, thanks for staying with me. I'm excited to shoot a little bourbon. I've kind of been in Scotch territory for a little while, and this is a nice presentation. It's a good bourbon from Old Forester. If you're kind of new to bourbon and you're wondering what is bottled and bond, basically it is a minimum of 4 years. It's released at 100 proof or 50%, and it's been distilled under the supervision of a single distillery season and master distiller, something like that. It was really back, I believe this date is a nod to the Act in 1897, an effort to ensure quality. No coloring, nothing added, minimum age, supervised by a single place. And I think that is the idea of releasing this 1897. Now, the Old Forester Whiskey Row series, I've only had a few of the bottles, samples of the 1910. I haven't had the 1870, and I love the 1920. Now, this Old Forester bottle and bond is in my market for a little while. Finally got on sale. If you know me, I really wait to buy something on sale. So it's a decent price, but it's still a premium price. So let's talk about the whiskey, see what we get, see if we like it, and then talk a little bit about the value. It is, I believe Old Forester uses a little bit higher rye, so about 18% rye, 10% barley, and then the balance in corn. I'll put it down below. Let's see what the whiskey gives us. It's a nice rich nose. It's got some spicing and some darker cinnamons that come up. But fruit notes, thicker fruit. Yeah, a little more. It's not as bright as a cherry, but a dark. I don't know, what would be a darker fruit that I'd be looking for. Some oak on the nose already. Just that tannin, that thicker. It's pretty classic bourbon. Brown sugar, some sweetness in there, some cinnamons, as I said, and then a little bit of a richer, thicker, almost a stewed apple kind of fruit. Let's try it on the palate. Cheers. Nice to be back in bourbon country. Lots of oak. It's not over oaked. It's just coming from where I was the last little while. I noticed the oak. I noticed some savory spices now, some nutmegs, edges of clove in with those cinnamons. The fruit backs away on the palate for me. I get it far more on the nose. And then now I'm playing in the finish where I've got that interplay of nice, almost char, oak, lingering spices, edge of bitterness. Better take another sip. This bourbon tends to stay, aside from the nose, which for me actually speaks well for some fruit characteristic, in the palate and in the finish, to me it stays kind of drier, huskier, oakier, but sweet. The sweetness would be more brown sugar sweetness than a honeyed sweetness. So brown sugar, molasses, cooked cinnamons. It stays a little drier, a little spicier, a little savorier than some bourbons. But I feel like that kind of flavor profile tends to slow me down. It actually tends to help me, think more about the whiskey and let it speak. And it's got a decent finish. This Old Forester 1897 is pretty good for me. I really like it. It's almost pushing into 4 stars. Quite nice. The only knock is the cost. In my market, I can get 1920 for exactly the same price. 1920 for me is much richer. It has way better fruit in the palate to balance that spiciness, that character from maybe a little higher rye. So it's tough for me to reach. And we're going to compare it to a very value bottled and bond to see if that goes any further. But do I like it? I do. This is a good bourbon. So if you haven't had it, especially if you like the Old Forester characteristic, and certainly if you're trying to fill out the shelf with the Whiskey Row series, like it should be brought home at some point. But it's a little more costly. So while it's a good bourbon, it's tough for me to just, you got to bring it home. It's like, it's good. There are others that play around that are just as good for me, or even better. Like the 1920 for this price, I will always bring home the 1920 over this bottle. I wanted to compare it specifically to this bottle, and so that's why I had to shoot this before this one went away. And the reason is, Old Granddad is higher rye. Now, it could be as high as around 27% rye, so it's got a lot more rye than the 18 here. But it's a high rye. It's also bottled and bond, so it's got that 100 proof for 50%, minimum 4 years, all of those things going on. And in my market, even on sale, it's less than half. Like it's, when this isn't on sale, this is I don't know, almost a third the price. So way better value in terms of price. But what do we get on the whiskey? It's got a lighter nose, certainly less fruit, more hot cinnamon, like cinnamon red, big red gum, that kind of cinnamon, red hearts. Sweetness on the nose for me is honeyed peanuts. Now that's classic Jim Beam to get some more nut. Not everyone gets all of that nut, and not every release from Jim Beam has it, but I definitely get it on the edges of Old Granddad. So sweeter, more honey, less fruit. Coming back, this is really richer on the nose. It is those cooked down cinnamons. I've said this before, that edges of cinnamon bun where it's just so rich on the palate. Cheers. I like the palate of Jim Beam. I get more alcohol, even though they're the same proof or percentage. I do get more alcohol on Old Granddad. Perhaps it's younger. I'm not sure, just the way they select their casks. But I like the flavor profile. Lots of toffee, caramel, again, more cinnamon. The oak is not as rich. I better try it back in comparison. It's interesting. I was about to say the Old Granddad is like sweeter and hotter cinnamons, but drier. But coming back to this, I actually find this very drying on my palate. But it is richer all the way through. A significantly better nose than Old Granddad, but the palate too gives a few more layers and a few deeper savory spices to think about. I really like Old Granddad, genuinely. I'm pretty sure that when this goes down, within the next couple of months for sure, another bottle will suddenly show up on my shelf. And part of that is because of the value. I think this 1897 is actually a better whiskey, but this is good. I like Old Granddad. The flavors are good. It's solid, works really well if you're gonna have a bold old fashioned or something like that. And it's just so easy to bring home. And it's still, to me, a quality product, especially for that price. So, while this is, I don't know what I keep rating Old Granddad, 3.5, 3 3/4 kind of thing. This is a richer, better whiskey, but you'll pay for the privilege of bringing that home. Thanks for joining me here. Why don't you share your thoughts? Have you had the 1897 or any of the other Whiskey Row series? Do you like this more than the 1920? What are the prices like in your market? Not that I want to do too much about that, because prices are something we really struggle to control. But I'd love to hear your experience of the whiskey, especially on this or any of the Old Foresters. Thanks again for joining me. You guys have a great weekend.